Do you want to know exactly how to get rid of stubborn belly fat? Well, before you can do this, you need to know why you have it. Well, luckily for you, I've got the answer. This is exactly why you are struggling with stubborn belly fat. And it's because your hormones are imbalanced. And more specifically, it means that your cortisol is disrupted. Every single aspect of your metabolism is influenced by your hormones. And contrary to what diet culture has told you, no tea, belly fat blasting detox, or belly fat exercise is going to get results if your hormones are imbalanced. So until you address the underlying root cause of your cortisol disruption, you will continually struggle with belly fat. So today we're gonna go over exactly what causes cortisol disruption, how you can balance your cortisol, and how you can get results and get rid of that stubborn belly fat. Now, if you're new to my channel, my name is Tasha Stevens. I'm a clinical nutritionist and hormone expert, and I've coached thousands of women in getting to the root cause of their hormone disruption and finally getting results, ditching symptoms, all without dieting, restriction, or spending hours in the gym. Now, belly fat is a hot topic, and I get it because it's frustrating, right? When we struggle with belly fat, it's annoying. It seems to linger, and no matter what you do, you cannot seem to get rid of it or get results. And now chronic stress is the number one cause of belly fat. And what happens is when you're stressed, your adrenals release your stress hormone called cortisol to respond to the threatening situation. And cortisol's role is to pull energy from the liver, from your body, from your muscle tissues in order to ensure that your body has the energy that it needs to survive that threatening situation. And in this threatening scenario, your body reallocates energy, it temporarily shuts down your appetite, and it stops other hormone production processes like ovulation or tissue repair because they're not necessary for survival. And it focuses entirely on getting you through that stressor and doing so in the most efficient way possible. And now this type of response is great when we think about what stress used to be, right? Stress used to be running from a predator or fighting that predator. But stress is no longer like that in today's society. Rather than your stress being short and ending, it is long and unrelenting. So even though stress has adapted in our life and in our society, your stress response hasn't. And so over the centuries, as stress has become more chronic, as it's been something that's low grade but never ending, your body still responds in the same way as it did in that primal time, where it reallocates energy and it goes to very drastic measures to make sure that you can survive that stressor. But think about it. If you live in a state where your stress is unrelenting, that means that cortisol response triggers constantly. And so when that cortisol is elevated chronically, it leads to really dangerous and unhealthy scenarios in your health. And now belly fat is released as a part of the endocrine response, right? What happens is your body starts to create belly fat so that your body has a fat storage system to pull from when the stressor happens again. And again, it's happening chronically in our society. And then what happens is these hormones that are released as a response to that belly fat start to impact your health. They increase inflammation in the body, and it's been linked to chronic conditions such as heart disease, diabetes, stroke. And then that cortisol and chronic stress starts to impact and influence other parts of your hormone production systems and metabolic function. And to the point where cortisol can disrupt ovulation, it can disrupt estrogen balance, all of which slow metabolic function and increase your body's propensity to storing fat. So you might be feeling a little discouraged at this point, but I want you to know that you absolutely can reduce belly fat. But it's important to understand what the root cause of chronic stress is in your life. And what we're gonna go over are the main causes of cortisol disruption and how you can start supporting them. So now the number one cause of chronic stress in women in today's society is undereating and nutrient deficiencies. Your body needs fuel to function, right? Your body needs fuel to make it through the day, to operate regular hormone and organ function, and of course to survive that stressor. And when you don't have fuel in the car, your car doesn't go, right? Same is true with your body. When you don't have fuel, your body doesn't get good at burning fat. It gets good at creating belly fat and creating an extra support mechanism to survive the stress of undereating. And this is absolutely contrary to everything diet culture has said, because they tell you to eat less, and you'll lose weight, lose body fat. And that's only correct in a very specific and small situation and for a short amount of time. But if you're chronically undereating, if you've been dieting for years, or if you've been undereating intentionally because you had no idea, that leads to devastating results and devastating impacts on your cortisol. So now the number one best way to support this is to move through a reverse diet and to slowly reintroduce nutrients at the right times and in the right amounts to improve metabolic efficiency. And what I mean by this is you need to focus on reintroducing nutrients and getting your current dietary intake to match your basal metabolic rate, which is your optimal burn, right? Your body has an energy expenditure each and every day, and we want to be eating to match that. So making sure that you're not in a deficit or too much in a surplus. But when your body is chronically stressed, it's in that fat storage state. So if you introduce nutrients too fast, it's going to absorb everything and store it as fat because it's like, oh, that's extra. So what we do is we strategically reintroduce nutrients and we time those nutrients to match your hormone cycle to make sure that your body accepts them and uses them efficiently. Now, the second cause of chronic stress in your body is blood sugar imbalance. So blood sugar rate regulation and insulin reactivity is an essential part of managing and maintaining balance in your body. And when you have disruptions in blood sugar, poor insulin reactivity, or erratic blood sugar spikes and drops, this can lead to increased stress in the system. And this occurs because part of your body's stress response is to temporarily reallocate energy to make sure that you have enough to survive the stressor. So in that process, your body will pull energy from the belly fat, right? And it will temporarily spike your blood sugar to make sure that you have the energy to get through. What happens is there's a stark spike and then a drop in blood sugar as you make it through that stressor. And that drop in blood sugar creates very intense cravings because it sends a signal to you saying you need to refuel immediately. And so often as a result, if you think about it, once you get through a stressor, you're typically craving carbs, or you might be craving something sweet or savory or salty. And you think of it as comfort food, but really that's your body's way of refueling for the next stressor. But because you're stressed out and because that roller coaster of blood sugar is so erratic, it can lead to really intense binging, right? And that's when you find yourself, in the pantry eating all of the chips or binging on a bunch of candy and feeling it's uncontrolled because your body is desperate to refuel that. So then what happens is you intake a ton of carbs and blood sugar, and it all enters the bloodstream as once. Insulin's job is to pick that up, mark it, and go reallocate it. But when there's a chronic influx of sugar into the blood, your insulin can get a little overworked and then it isn't as efficient. And that's what's known as decreased insulin reactivity. So this is often the case with things like type 2 diabetes or insulin resistance. Is basically your insulin is there, it's present, but it's no longer able to keep up with the demand of your blood sugar, leading to chronically elevated blood sugar and then chronic disruptions of blood sugar as a result of your stress response and poor insulin reactivity. As a result, this can also influence your other hunger hormones, such as leptin and ghrelin, and imbalance your body's ability to tell you when it's satiated, or AKA full, as well as your body's ability to tell you like, hey, I'm hungry, it's time to refuel. So oftentimes this then perpetuates that cycle of disrupted blood sugar because you might be more prone to eating too much in a sitting or skipping meals and going long periods of time without eating, which adds more stress to the system. So the best way to support this, of course, coincides with the reverse diet, but also making sure that you're eating balanced meals at regular intervals. Contrary again to what diet culture tells you, the best way to improve insulin reactivity is to introduce food at a regular interval every 3 to 4 hours to make sure that your body doesn't get stressed out, and to pair carbohydrates with proteins and fats so that your insulin has time to respond effectively. Cutting carbs can actually decrease insulin reactivity and make you more sensitive. And then overloading in carbs obviously overworks insulin. So we want to find that perfect balance. And when you eat every 3 to 4 hours, it ensures that your body never goes into starvation mode or never feels that it is threatened. So it reduces the cortisol response. Now, another common cause of belly fat is low testosterone production. And now, as women, we have kind of been told that testosterone is a male hormone or that too much testosterone is bad. But in fact, when you have low levels of testosterone, it increases your body's propensity to store belly fat. What's even crazier is when you have lower testosterone, this increases your body's ability to store fat. And then fat tissue or adipose tissue makes a particular enzyme called aromatase, which converts testosterone precursors into estrogen rather than testosterone. So that exacerbates estrogen dominance. And the more estrogen there is, the more your body produces fat cells to store excess estrogen. And then those fat cells make their own estrogen, and it further perpetuates the cycle. Now, one of the best ways to improve testosterone production in your body beyond a reverse diet, reducing chronic stress, is through strength training. Strength training is one of the only exercise forms that improves and boosts natural testosterone production. And don't worry, it's not gonna overproduce or lead to any kind of crazy amount. However, it's really important to remember that exercise, while a positive stressor, is still a stressor on your body. And so if your body is not willing or able to accept that stress, it can lead to more disruptions in cortisol and belly fat. So the best way to make sure that you're working out in strength training in the right way is to match it with your hormone cycle, which is known as cycle synced fitness. You have different hormone phases, and at each phase, your hormones influence your body's ability to handle intensity, workload, weight, all of that. When you start to adapt your training and your strength training to match your hormonal fluctuations, it leads to progressive overload, which is positive. It leads to improved physiological adaptations, and it ensures that you don't overtrain and diminish your results. And now that final cause of belly fat is chronic inflammation and inflammatory foods. And chronic inflammation is really frustrating because it can be hard to detect. And symptoms of inflammation can kind of coincide with other symptoms, so you might even brush over them entirely. However, chronic inflammation influences belly fat, and belly fat itself influences chronic inflammation. And so it's one of those scenarios where they kind of feed off of each other. And what happens is your belly fat releases what's known as VDL. VDL, also known as very low density lipoprotein, is a fatty acid that's released from your belly fat when cortisol levels are high. So your body releases VDL in response to stress. And when that VDL is released, your body's still also metabolically active and releasing something known as cytokines. These influence your body's health. They influence the stress response, increasing it, and they also increase your risk for developing certain conditions such as heart disease or diabetes. Now, the combination of VDL as well as your adipose tissue leads to telling your body that stress is high and that your body still needs to produce cortisol in response to that. And so even just having inflammation in your life or having belly fat further perpetuates the stress cycle. And so one of the most important ways to reduce overall inflammation and try to reduce your body's stress response is to remove inflammatory triggers in your diet. There are foods that are known to have inflammatory properties, but there are also foods that are deemed healthy that cause inflammation in your body, and these are known as inflammatory for you foods. Depending on your diet, your exposure to nutrients, as well as your medical history, environment, that influences your body's ability to accept particular nutrients. And oftentimes, foods that we eat on repeat or foods that we eat because we think that they're healthy can cause an inflammatory response, leading to an attack of your tissues, an attack of your gut lining, and as a result, that leads to disrupted nutrient absorption, loss of nutrients in digestion, loss of energy in digestion, and nutrient gaps that further influence stress response and hormone production. So it can be really tricky because even if you feel that you're eating healthy, you have chronic low-grade inflammation as a result of your diet that's then further perpetuating the stress. So the best way to adapt this and adjust this is to identify your inflammatory for you foods. I typically recommend doing this through a food sensitivity test. My favorite is Everlywell. I'll link it in the comments. But what it does is it tests a ton of different foods in your level of reactivity. Knowing that allows you the opportunity to temporarily eliminate them from your diet, allow space for your gut to heal, to reduce stress response, to ensure that you're absorbing nutrients from your food, and then you can typically reintroduce them fairly easily or reintroduce them and still enjoy them in moderation. So as you can tell, the number one cause of stress, or the common theme across the root causes for your belly fat, is your diet. And so the best way to reduce diet is to do an entire 180 on how you approach your nutrition, how you approach losing belly fat and stepping away from calorie restriction, detoxes, belly ab workouts, and really focusing on nourishing your systems and reducing stress in your body. And I know this can be a little overwhelming because you're like, okay, well, basically it's against everything I've been taught. But if you're ready to take that next step, and if you are like, I am serious about getting my hormones in check, reducing stress, and getting rid of this belly fat once and for all, I absolutely recommend applying for one-on-one hormone balance coaching. We create a 100% customized for you program, meal plans, workout plans, cardio plans that addresses your root cause of hormonal disruption, your system imbalances, and is tailored to meet your goals and lifestyles to ensure your success. And not to mention, you get one-on-one accountability and support every step of the way from myself and my team of coaches to ensure your success and to make sure that you are able to adapt this for life. Now, if you have any questions or comments at all regarding this video, please don't hesitate to drop them in the comments or reach out to me perfectly. And if you found this helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and even share with a friend.